I expected some great things from Nonnas. It sounded great, the cast is brilliant. It currently has 7 out of 10 on IMDb across 9.3 thousand reviews and ratings, so it's been very well received. And honestly, it's kind of mediocre. It's not terrible, it's a pretty average film, but I was expecting greatness, and the execution is not very good. Also, the lighting isn't very good. This is the only real technical complaint I have. Everything else is about the characters and the story. Not that I'm complaining too much, it is an okay film, but the lighting is really unpleasant, and that gives it a really kind of murky colour palette almost, and not every film needs to be bright and bold, but I just didn't think it was very nice to look at. So that was just one more reason why I thought it wasn't that great, but if that was the only issue, I wouldn't care. This was released this year in 2025. It's directed by Stephen Chbosky, and it's written by Liz Maccie, inspired by the story of Jodie Scaravella. And we have a cast including Vince Vaughn. Vince Vaughn was the first reason why I wanted to watch this, and then I realised that we had Susan Sarandon, and just such a really brilliant cast. The performances are great. The Nonnas are interesting. The rest of the characters are incredibly boring. This is about Vince Vaughn's character. He plays a character called Joe, and he's recently lost his mother, obviously grieving through this. And yes, that does give it a little bit of an emotional angle. It's not heartbreaking. It is a comedy, but it does give it a little bit of heaviness. And I guess that part of it felt realistic. And he decides to open up an Italian restaurant, and the chefs are all nonnas, grandmothers, and they're relying on their family recipes and their years of experience of cooking these dishes. And as a concept, I love it. And we have these older women coming together, having some really great discussions. I will say the dialogue between those characters is really great. And their personalities are quite different as well. So we have a lot of different things going on there, a lot of different opinions. And I think those characters were very well written. The performances are great. But the rest of the characters are really boring. And we have, obviously, Vince Vaughn's character has some personal issues with the emotional aspect, with the grief. And while that seems really important, and it is definitely the driving force behind the narrative, it just felt like padding. Whenever we focused on his character, I felt like we were taking time away from the nonnas, from the grandmothers, from the interesting aspect of the film. And the film's about 1 hour and 50. It's almost 2 hours. And honestly, I think maybe 1 hour and 20. I'm plucking that number out of nowhere. But I'd say the time we focus on the nonnas could in itself be just about a feature-length film, and maybe a tiny bit of padding around it. But for me, there's so much fluff. And yes, obviously, the grief aspect is a driving force. Without that, we probably wouldn't have had this restaurant. But that part of it, I just don't think is very interesting. I don't think it's very well done. I believe Joe's emotions. I think they're very believable. But that part of the narrative is dull, and it's not very well handled, and it just takes us away from what I think is the interesting part of the narrative. So I guess the good bits, with the grandmothers, as it were, are very good, very interesting, very well written, great characters, great performances, but I'd say about a third of the film is incredibly dull. It was also very slow as well to begin with. So I think there is room for improvement, but it's an okay film. As I said, going into it, I expected greatness. It seemed like it was going to be a brilliant experience for so many reasons. Also, I didn't find it funny. I didn't think it was a very funny film. I feel like it's more of a drama. There are some light-hearted moments, but in general, I didn't get a lot of comedy with this, which is a shame, because often with Vince Vaughn films, I do find them to be very funny. And I guess maybe because, as far as I can see, the comedy is supposed to come from the grandmothers for the most part, I didn't really find a lot of it funny. So there are just too many aspects that make this an okay film. And that's not necessarily a bad film. A film being okay is okay. Not every film is going to be amazing. But as I said, going into this, it sounded brilliant. The cast is good. The rating on IMDb is high, so I expected much more. Maybe my expectations were too high. Maybe if I went in just thinking it would be an average film and we got an average film, I wouldn't be too disappointed. So maybe that's on me for expecting too much. But nevertheless, Nonnas is a pretty average film with some really good moments, but some very dull moments. So it kind of balances out as being okay. Do I recommend it? Yes, I do. All of that being said, I do recommend it. I'd say manage your expectations. Sure, 7 out of 10 is a high rating, but I don't agree with that. So I'd say go into it maybe hoping for greatness, but also expecting something a little bit more average, depending on your tastes. For me, though, it's an okay film. I didn't love it. It didn't meet my expectations, but ultimately, Nonnas was still an okay experience.